Sorry, I can't be with you on the call live today. I'm at the World Circular Economy Forum, so I've recorded this in advance. Today I'm going to be talking to you about two things. So maybe giving you a brief update on the global developments linked to trade and the circular economy over the past couple of years. And then secondly, based on my experience and research and the work of others, maybe some recommendations to this informal working group on potential next steps and interesting areas for further work. Just to introduce myself, I've for the past several years now done a lot of research on the intersections between international trade and the circular economy, particularly through the lens of the just transition, inclusivity and equity, as well as international affairs and geopolitics. And so if we move on to part one, so just to give you a really broad overview of some of the main developments I think you might find interesting as the group. What's clear, so we have mapped at Chatham House, we've mapped over 540 different policies across 100 countries linked to the circular economy. And what's most interesting is that more than 80% of these have been launched since 2010. So really seen an exponential and explosive growth in these pieces of legislation. But not only is it policy, there's a really broad range of global developments going on the circular economy which infringe and impinge upon the topics of trade. For example, we've just conducted a global stocktake with UNIDO on the growth of national circular economy roadmaps, and of which there are now 72 published since 2016. On top of national roadmaps, which have now presented over 3,000 different types of policy action across 20 different sectors. So that's really showing what's coming down the line in the next decade. You've got the integration of circular economy at regional or plurilateral levels. So you have, for example, the ASEAN framework on the circular economy, a coalition of the ASEAN bloc working together to look at trade, cooperation and coordination around the circular economy. You've got the African Circular Economy Roadmap, the EU CE Action Plan, even the G7 Berlin Roadmap. Moving on from that, you've got integration of circular economy within multilateral environmental agreements. So of course, INC on plastic pollution, but as well as its increasing revisions within the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, and increasingly integration into Paris Agreement NDCs. So more than 79 countries have now included direct action on circular economy within their NDCs. You've got, of course, trade fora and also integration of CE into trade agreements. So some of the fora, obviously yourselves as an informal group, Dialogue on Plastics, the Committee on Trade and Environment, but also the World Customs Organization now taking a keen interest on this topic. You've got the proliferation of standards and guidelines, both at global level, so ISO's TC323, due to be published this year, but you've also got a proliferation of national standards. You've got the World Business Council's Sustainable Development Circularity Protocol, essentially a global protocol for industry to operate within a framework of the circular economy, and many, many other different types of standards. You've got international coalitions now forming, the Global Alliance of Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency, the African Circular Economy Alliance, the Latin American and Caribbean Circular Economy Coalition, things in the Nordics, you've got UNICE and UNICE regions, and a global roadmap for a circular economy as well. And then you've got industrial alliances. So in short to say, there is a rapid and complex evolving global landscape surrounding the circular economy. But what I'm increasingly observing is that it's increasingly fragmented and evolving, and that serves as many challenges particularly for trade. Just to show you quickly, we are publishing this global stocktake this week in Brussels at the World Circular Economy Forum with UNIDO, but we did a deep dive into 72 national circular economy roadmaps. And aside from identifying 2,900 individual policy actions that governments are committing to in the next decade on circular economy across 20 sectors, what perhaps you'll find most interesting is that when you look at the types of policies and legislations being committed to, those linked to transboundary issues, either in waste or used goods or secondary raw materials, or goods and materials that are needed for the circular transition, that is severely underlooked or overlooked in these national roadmaps. And what we find is across all 72 national roadmaps, they tend to be overly focused on internal national transition to the circular economy without thinking through the ripple effects and consequences on other trade partners, so potential technical barriers to trade, but also overlook their interdependence with other trade partners to achieve their domestic policy goals. So that is really a concerning trend that needs to be addressed. Now, of course, so at Chatham House, we also map the trade in used goods, secondary raw materials, waste and scrap around the world. We have a tool, an interactive tool here that you can see that we use to map this. And you can see just, rapid growth in circular economy related trade since 2000, outpacing the average growth rate of the trade in goods globally. But you can see particularly just in these past couple of years, really rapid growth in secondary raw material and used goods trade, and that's particularly metal and scrap metal being traded. So it's really increasingly become an important topic to focus on. We published the framework for collective action on inclusive circular trade, recognizing that at the moment it's a very fragmented approach, and there's a risk that the global circular economy transition is done at a more protectionist, nationalist approach, and that will have severe consequences, particularly for developing and least developed countries. There's a big list of actions that we developed for different trade categories. You can go online and see this report. I won't go into it in detail here, but it's worth checking out. So I've also published this second report with the World Customs Organization, so with Gail Gruby from the WCO, where we looked at the challenges and barriers that the current harmonized system of codes present for enabling circular economy related trade. And we delve into quite a bit of depth around potentially new classifications and restructuring of the HS, but also new and novel trade facilitation approaches, such as trusted circular trader programs and resource recovery lanes, to help work around these limitations of the HS and enable trade that facilitates the circular economy whilst also staying true to the intentions of the likes of the Basel Convention and other multilateral environmental agreements. So I'm aware I only have a few more minutes to present to you, but hopefully that gave you a good overview of some of the current developments that are going on in the area and why it's so critical this informal working group is in existence and can help to shed some light on this area. So in part 2 of this presentation, I want to share with some recommendations for the working. So I've listed 4 recommended areas here, and this is based on my own work on the ground pilots in various countries around the world, as well as my research at the intergovernmental level, but also the work of others on this topic, particularly TESS's expert working group on circular economy and trade, where they've gathered a big group of experts on this topic to think this through. In terms of the 4 areas, I would highly recommend doing a deep dive into sector-specific challenges. I think we've got a pretty good grasp now of the overall challenges related to circular economy and trade, and now we need to take that to the next level and really understand at the sectoral level what these challenges manifest as. Electronics and electrical items and e-waste or textiles is definitely two sectors that I would recommend. And within that deep dive, you could look at regulatory standards, institutional developments, divergence and convergence of definitions and classifications, lists of essential goods and services necessary for circularity in these sectors and the barriers that these goods face in trade, as well as innovative trade facilitation approaches that could be used. On trade facilitation specifically, it would be worth undertaking a study to look at best practice solutions to allow customs agencies to evaluate goods based on their circularity properties, their intrinsic circularity properties, rather than just their physical attributes, which tends to be what's the case for HS classification. This is a major inhibitor at the moment in terms of facilitating circular trade. As well as that, you could look at technical barriers to trade. Particularly the growing TBTs on developing and least developed countries from those pieces of legislation introduced in ambitious industrialized countries. Think of the ESPR and the Digital Product Passport, and really get a solid understanding of the concerns and challenges that least developed and developing countries will face in dealing with this. And then finally, just to expand the dialogue to broader fora, trade fora, so TBT committee, trade facilitation, other groups to get their expert input as well. And then finally, just to say, I've put together a more detailed list of actions that you're welcome to look at. In the purple ones are the ones that I think you may be most interested in as a group. I've added them into this slide, and the slides will be shared with you, so I'm not going to cover them here. But you're more than welcome to reach out to me in the future if you want a further discussion on my thinking behind this. And with that, I'll end there, and here's some publications. I think one on the right, the role of international trade in realizing an inclusive circular economy. This is a very extensive and deep dive report into the different types of circular economy trade flows and the challenges individual governments face in participating in this area. And with that, sorry, I'm not here to take questions, but please reach out to me individually. I'm more than happy to engage at any time. And thank you very much for your time and for asking me to do this, and we'll speak soon. Thank you.